So yeah, hi everyone. From this video, we will start writing our client-side code that is in Flutter. Okay. So let's close all the things which are open currently. We will close all and let's open the terminal over here. Okay. Now, as of now, we have library and the main file only. So in this part, what we will do, we will start defining the folder structure of our project. We are going to use a clean architecture, so we will define the project folder accordingly. So let's define our project structure. That would be, firstly we have domain, then we would have our data layer, then we would have our presentation layer. Okay, let's see how the clean architecture is worked briefly, then we will define this. Okay, so fine, in clean architecture we have three main layers: data, domain and presentation. Fine, in domain layer we have three parts: entities, use cases and our interface, which we define in form of an abstract class of our repository. Okay, so what are entities? So you can imagine entities is kind of a building blocks of your application. Like let's say you are building a home, then what could be entity for building a home? So you can imagine that one entity could be bricks. So bricks are the basic entity to build any kind of a home. Okay, so those things we will define inside our entity file at a domain layer. So they are independent from everything. So that's why we will define inside a entity part. Okay, the next thing is use cases. What the basically use cases represent the business logic of our application. What the business logic we can perform, like we can create something, we can update something and we can delete. Basically what they are doing, they encapsulate the rules which we define over the our projects. Okay, so you can imagine that in let's say you are building a home. So walls, you can imagine that like how the walls of house separate different rooms. So you can imagine like that use cases will encapsulate your business logic, how things are going there behind the things. Okay, so the next part we would have inside domain part, we will define our interface, that is repository. Okay, why we are doing that? Inside repository we will define how the interface of our data access. Okay, so this layer, the repository part inside our domain layer, will act as a that will be act as bridge between our domain layer and the data layer. Okay, fine, and this will ensure that our domain layer is not dependent on any specific data source part. Okay, so let's define that. Let's create a three folder, that is entities. Okay, entities, and then we have folder that would be repository. Let's rename it to entities, and we could have a folder called use cases, and then we have folder that would be repository. Okay, and we will also have one more folder, that is abstract class of our data source. So let's define that also here inside our domain layer, that would be data sources. Okay, so we defined our domain layer folders here. Now let's come on our data layer and see what the folder structure on that part. Okay, so in our data layer we have a three folder: data source implementation, our models and repository implementation. Okay, inside repository implementation we will implement our repository which we define inside a domain layer, and inside data source layer we will implement our data source which define abstract class inside a domain layer abstract class, and inside the models we will extend our entities here and add some additional method, like we will add a serializer, deserializer stuff, copy with method inside our models part. Okay, so these two things are done here. So now the next part is presentation layer. Okay, inside presentation layer we can define two more folder, that could be our widgets and our pages. Fine. Okay, if you are seeing this diagram, in the innermost part we have entities, and then after entities we have use cases, and that after use case we have our controllers, gateways and presenters, and at the end what we have, our devices, that is user interface, the presentation layer. If you're saying that entities, this is totally independent from any other layer. So this entity is not dependent on any file or any folder, so this would be totally independent. Okay, and then we have use cases. So this use cases would be dependent on entities. So let's say you are building a home, and the main component for building a home, or you can say the main entity is bricks. Bricks is totally independent, it's not dependent on any other part. But for building a wall you need entities, that is bricks. Without that you could not do that. So use cases is dependent on this entity, you can think according that. Okay, so now let's define some more folder Like we could have our core folder where we can define the common things, like we can add folder app where we'll define our starting app. Then we could have also a folder called constants where we'll define the constants whatever we use inside our application. Then we could also have an error, common error, so we will define there. And then we could have our navigation part here, so we will define it one more folder for navigation. And then we could have our utils, so we will define that one more folder, that is utils. Okay, and then we could also have shared widgets which we'll use over all the application, so we'll define a shared widgets folder, we'll place all the common component over here. Okay, and we could also have some common use cases, so we can add it inside our core part, that would be common use case, and let's rename it to use cases. And also we could have our theme of our projects, because we are going to use dark and light theme in this project, so we will define one more project folder, that would be theme. So also we are using dependency injection in this project, so we could also have a new folder that could be injector, we will define the dependency injection there, where initialize that inside our injector part. So this all the folder structure inside the core part. Okay, so the next thing what we can do inside pages widgets, we can define here our new folder, that could be block, where we'll define our application block here. Okay, fine. So we define the folder structure of our project which we're going to follow. So this folder structure would be little bit different from our server side code, because the server side code and the client side code would be a little bit different. We are using here backend, we didn't require this models folder, we didn't use this. So let's remove from this backend here. Okay, we have library inside our, but in our front end part and our client side we will purely follow the clean architecture, and we will also write the